Hello everyone and welcome to my introduction guide to the Contention Cold War server. It's a brand new server that was released just last week. Much of it will be familiar to players of the Contention 80s server, but with some major changes that we'll be covering here today. Just to try and keep this video down in length, I will only be covering the new things for Contention Cold War. So if you want an overview of the Contention servers in general, I'll have a link to that at the end at the top of my guide. Equally, last week I put out a video covering everything in the 1.8 patch that is common to both the Cold War and the more modern servers. So we'll just be looking at what is changing going over to the new Contention Cold War. So let's jump in. So starting off then with the plane sets, this has obviously been changed rather significantly from the 80s server. Notably, a lot of the modern planes will be missing. At time of recording, the airframes available for blue is the A10A, the A10C, but not the two variants, so you do not get the HMCS. The A4, which we will cover in more detail a little bit later. The Apache is in, but I do know there is discussion about removing that. The Vigan, the C101, the Chinook, the F4, the F5, both Flaming Cliffs and non-Flaming Cliff version, the Sabre, Flaming Cliffs and non-Flaming Cliff version, the MB339A, the Kiwa, the Gazelle, and the Hui. Over on red, we have the KA50, both the regular version and the Mark III variant. Again, I think there's a big asterisk there that may change by the time you're watching this. There is discussion of whether or not those should be in. But then we've got the L39, both the C and the ZA variant, the MI24, the MI8, and then the MiG-15 in both its individual and Flaming Cliffs version, the MiG-19, the MiG-21, the Mirage F1 in the BE, CE, and EE variant, the Su-25 and the Su-25T. So a lot of the more modern airframes are done away with, and this should give you time to shine with these earlier airframes. Next up, another major change is the weapon restrictions. They're doing this in a little bit of a different way. Instead of the main server, which has 80s, 90s, and modern, this one has 4 eras, but they're not really tied to any decade in particular. Instead, they're really tied to certain gameplay styles. So Era 1 is the standard and is about mid-Cold War-ish. You have IR missiles in the form of AIM-9J and R-60s. There are no Fox 1 missiles, and there are severe limitations to air-to-ground weapons. Pretty much all of the air-to-ground weapons are going to be dumb bombs on this. That's going to be true for most of the eras. You've got dumb bombs and dumb rockets, no laser-guided ordnance, no laser-guided weaponry. Era 2 then is a little bit of an adaptation to that, still sticking with the same class of Fox 2 missiles, but these also have some Fox 1s in the form of the AIM-7E and the R3R. No changes are made to the air-to-ground weapons. That puts this pretty much similar to Heatblur's Cold War's normal era servers there, if you're wanting something to compare it to. We then have Era 3, which is very, very early Cold War. In this one, you're limited to the AIM-9B and the R3S. No Fox 1 missiles, no changes to ground weapons. So these are very early missiles, very bad missiles, effectively. And this is going to be similar to the early form of Heatblur Cold War, when you've got the AIM-9B rotation. And then we've got Era 4, which is, in quotation marks, unrestricted, though it's not really quite. In terms of IR missiles, you do have unrestricted IR missiles, but no AIM-9Ms. Other than that, anything that your airframe is capable of carrying, you can carry it. For Fox 1 missiles during the Era 4 playthrough, you've got AIM 7Fs as the maximum, R3Rs, S530Fs, and R530FEM missiles for those Mirage pilots. There is also laser-guided bombs here. There are no GPS-guided weaponry, but you do have precision weapons there. And also to note that the Apache does not get the fire control radar or its radar-guided missiles, even on this late era. In terms of maps, this will be running primarily on Syria and Caucasus, and there is also a Caucasus Coast mission which is a lot more zoomed in. That one will only be running during that Era 3, the early era rear aspects mission. At time of recording, they are also planning further missions. These are somewhere in the works, but with no ETA. Looking at Cold War Germany when that map is out, Cold War Sinai, and Cold War Persian Gulf. As I said, all of that's very far in the future, so we don't have any info on that right now. One major change that I think will make a lot of people happy is the wonderful A4 mod is being added to the Cold War server. And so if you get this mod, you will be able to play on the Blue 4 side. It's a really well done mod, really fits the era very well. It is used in other servers such as Heatblur's Cold War, and I'm a big fan of the module myself. Two things to note here. One is that at time of recording, the A4 doesn't work with dynamic slots, so if you're spawning in an A4, you're going to have to use the static slots. Those have been provided. There is an issue right now with the dynamic spawns where it will show A4 on both sides and neither side is able to select it, so just use static spawns there. The other issue is you do not technically need to download the mod in order to play on the server, but do be aware that if you do not have the mod, then all A4s on the server will show up as a Su-27 flanker. You'll be able to find links to this on the SPS Discord, and I will try and remember to include a link to the current version down below in this video. Another really big change from the main servers to the Cold War is the addition of the splash damage script. Much of the testing phase of Contention Cold War was done fine-tuning this script, and so this will be familiar to people who have played on other servers such as Heatblur Cold War. What this does is make the actual fragmentation HE damage in DCS actually do something. And so it will actually make your larger bombs and dumbfire weapons do serious damage to things that they didn't perfectly hit on. This makes a lot of the ordnance that will be dropping a lot more useful. You don't have to get a perfect hit with a bomb, you just need to put it near a target, which is a lot more understandable with dropping 2,000 pounds of explosive. One major thing to note here is that you will not always be credited for your kills with the splash damage system. That is because if you, the player, do not do any damage to the target, DCS doesn't know who to award the kill to, and so nobody gets it. If you do at least a little bit of damage, so as long as it's within the actual default DCS splash damage range, you'll normally get credited the kill. If you do some damage to it beforehand, you'll get credited the kill. But if it's purely killed by the additional splash damage, then very often it will not appear in the kill feed, it will not appear in your credits. This is a limitation of DCS, and it's just something we have to live with. The important thing is you do kill, you do help your team progress, and certainly you do get some kills here, so you are still earning credits. You just get slightly fewer than you might want, but you're still definitely helping your team there. And just from personal experience, in conjunction with the depot system, which was covered in my last video, this is really effective at making things like the rocket pods on the F5 really feel nice and powerful and useful, and I've been taking those out a lot more than I ever have before. Now, another massive change to the Cold War server is in terms of situational awareness and radar coverage and EWR, and that it has been severely reduced. This has been done in several different ways. One is simply that there are a lot less EWR systems. There is no AWACS on the Cold War server, and the EWR stations have been reduced. Instead of using the default DCS EWR, which has some incredibly long range to it and can normally see pretty much the other side of the map, we've now had this reduced to dog-ear radars only for red and Roland EWRs for blue. These have a much smaller range, and so you will be getting much more patchy EWR coverage. You can absolutely build this up yourself by hopping into CTLD in helicopters, for example, and putting down more of these sites, help building up a picture. But it's definitely going to be patchy, and anything that is not currently being detected is not going to appear on the EWR callouts in the top right corner. And equally for JTAC and TACCOM commanders, they are not going to get eyes on anything that is not being actively detected. The number of radar SAM systems has also been severely reduced. There are Hawk sites, SA-8s and SA-2s which will feed information into EWR, but there are a lot fewer of these. And so, in general, you're not going to get anywhere near as much coverage. The other thing that we need to be aware of here is that the system of EWR updates has changed a bit. The EWR picture updates every 20 seconds. It will give you automatic callouts as it does update, but if you ask for an EWR picture or bogey dope between those 20 seconds, it will simply feed you the older set of data. So you can still ask for a bogey dope if, say, you've missed that last message that popped up and you just want to bring that information back in, but it is going to be out of date. And so the information that you're being fed tends to lag behind quite a bit. Still gives you some situational awareness, still lets you know that a threat is there, makes it a lot less likely you're just going to be slapped out the sky by something you had no idea was there, but you're not going to be able to rely on it as much to directly find. Instead, you're going to need to use the instruments in your plane or your good old Mark 1 eyeball to have a look outside and spot the things. And lastly, just a few other changes I wanted to highlight. One is that warbirds now do appear on EWR coverage in the Cold War setting, so if you are flying a plane and it is detected by one of these few EWR systems, you are going to pop up just like a fast-moving jet does, so do bear that in mind, all of you warbird pilots. Also worth noting for warbird and helicopter pilots, the FAC artillery has been completely disabled for all airframes in this Cold War setting. You can still use the FAC system to call smoke in on enemies. It still gives you a heads up to what is vaguely around you, but you can no longer call in artillery to get those kills. Instead, you are going to need to get those kills yourself. The good news with that comes into the final part, that there are a lot more soft targets in this. In general, the ground targets have been massively reduced in their timescale. They're a lot softer and a lot older, and so you can generally take them out with things like even rockets aboard helicopters. Should be no problem. Equally, there are a lot fewer air threats out there. There are still radar SAM systems that you do need to keep an eye out for, so don't get too excited. Do keep an eye out for launches, but there is a lot less, and the radar SAM systems that we have are a lot less effective than they were in the old system. And even those units that are still available on CTLD are very often now either much more expensive or need multiple different cargo drops to set up. So you can still put down a Shilka, but now that's going to be a major investment in time, requiring 3 trips to set up one of them. So you're going to see far fewer radar AAA out there. And similarly for things like tanks, tank spawns are much more expensive and much rarer, and so generally the ground units are going to be a lot easier to hunt down, a lot easier to kill, and a lot less of a threat, making up for the fact that your planes are going to have to get in a lot lower to put in munitions accurately on targets. Otherwise, the server is now up, everything is running. All of the other updates that came with the Contention 1.8 patch have been implemented, and so this means that the Cold War server right from the get-go is getting things like strongholds, it's getting depots, it's getting the oil platform system, and so there is a huge amount that you can do there. All of these have been tuned to make them suitable for the Cold War era aircraft, and so there is a huge amount that we can get on with. As I said in my previous video, I will be producing specific guide videos on the new systems such as Caesar and depots and so on, but for now I just want to try and keep this as quick as possible. If you do have any questions or specific requests for certain videos you want to see, please do leave them down below, and otherwise I hope to catch you in a future video. Till then, remember to be kind to yourselves and everyone else. Cheers.